Hey everyone, today's guest is Amy Demas, president of Communicate Excellence, a firm that specializes in improving the communication skills of administrative teams. Amy attended the United States Military Academy at West Point and went on to earn a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from Missouri University of Science and Technology and an MBA from the University of Phoenix. As Vice President of Global Fulfillment with Bank of America, she was responsible for the acquisition of over 55 U.S. patents. She is Six Sigma certified, an international speaker, an author, a coach, and on top of that, she's the practice manager of her husband's orthodontics practice. It's amazing she has time to be on our show, but we're glad she's here. Amy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Richie. I really appreciate you asking me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
I can't hear.
as I see your bio, how did you get from mechanical engineering to communicating excellence? It must be an interesting journey.
It is definitely a winding journey, but
Yeah.
it's been fascinating. So after I got my mechanical engineering degree, I was at that time married to somebody in the military, and I ended up getting a job in Kentucky where I designed pipe stress runs for petrochemical piping. So you're talking 14-inch pipes that are at 400 degrees, and you're building expansion loops. So basically, big braces on a huge scale, which is
right.
kind of odd that happened. Well, then during one of those economic downturns and crisis that was happening in the early 90s, they laid us all off. And so you're thinking, what am I going to do now? Well, I was expecting my first child, and I ended up being a stay-at-home mom. I ended up homeschooling my kids. And so there's turn number one. And I was home with them for over a dozen years where I developed homeschooling program or assimilated it. Love teaching. Well, turn number two, I ended up being a single parent. And at that point, you're thinking, now what do I do? So the kids are now in school. And I ended up reconnecting with a friend that I went to West Point with. And that's how I got into Bank of America. So my role at Bank of America, the first part was turning your checks into images. You know how that's done nowadays?
Oh, yeah.
I was in that area. Yeah, that was my space. And so I worked on check products and cash products throughout there. And that's where most of my patent work is. And then,
so you made it. You helped make it possible for that to happen, which is critical right now for everyone, isn't it?
Well, and do you realize that came about because of a national calamity?
Oh,
I don't know if you yes. Then because of 9/11 and planes were grounded, no planes could fly. You had all these people who had their money, but the checks could not go back and forth between banks. And so money was at a standstill, kind of like our businesses feel like a standstill.
Yeah.
And because of that, innovation had to come about and legislation, and it was what enabled us to now process and transfer money via images instead of through a piece of paper.
That's fascinating.
It was through a calamity that actually occurred. But then turn number three, while at Bank of America, I was working with a life coach, and she introduced me to Dr. Don Demas, an orthodontist.
Yeah, I got you.
And so after that period of time, we dated and got married, and then I ended up starting to work for him. And I was thrown in at the front desk, no training, no orthodontic training, just please answer the phones for me. So did that. And when your husband is the doctor, any other time an administrative role got emptied for some other reason, I had to sit in that role. and
running by fire, I guess.
It was trial by fire. And I thought that's what I was going to do the rest of my life, be as treatment coordinator, do all these different things. And then my last major turn in life was I ended up having cancer. And I used to have brown hair. I used to, I said this is a platinum upgrade from that. Came back. and it was at that point you say, what do I want to be? What do I want to do as I grow up? And Absolutely. I had to go back to my roots of I'm a teacher at heart. And so that's how I came about to doing Communicate Excellence. I want to empower others, teach others. That's me in a nutshell of where I wish to be. So that's that winding path that has gotten me to where I am today.
Wow. So tell us a little bit more about Communicate Excellence. What are you doing?
Sure. So what I did is, my husband is a great empowerer. So I've had exposure to many consultants along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is that our front desk people tend to get left out on there. It's more of a thought of, well, just tell them how to take the phone off and on and off hold, and isn't that enough?
Oh gosh, no, yeah.
And it's not. You realize that.
Sure.
One of the interesting things is we put a lot of training, obviously, into our clinical teams.
Yeah.
And they have a skill set, and our doctors are specialized. They do as well. We put a lot of money into our treatment coordinators because that's the sales part. But do you realize that your front desk, your scheduling coordinators talk to, patient-facing interactions many times 5, 6, 7, 8 times more than anybody else in the office?
I mean, they're having such a huge influence on your brand in general. They're the front line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, a treatment coordinator may see 10% of the patients a day.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor sees less than 100% because there's some people who come in for picking up clear retainers and they walk in and out.
Yeah.
But your front desk, they greet them, they send them out, they set an appointment, and they handle all the calls. So they are easily touching and making impressions with people 5, 6, 7, 8 more times than any other person in the office. And so they needed to be empowered, and that's why I got in there.
Okay.
And it's more than simply providing a book of scripts, because we know it,
Yeah.
doesn't mean we do it. I mean, how many diet books do I own? But it's the actual implementation of it on there. And that's where what I do shines, is taking it from head knowledge to actual habits.
So, all right. So you're not just doing scripts. What else are you doing? How are we
Thank you for asking.
Represent. Yeah.
So what I do is either on-site or remotely, I provide an initial training session, and that provides a foundation. All it is it's like filling your toolbox with all these tools, but it's what I do afterwards that is where the magic happens. And I do it through the coaching of actual phone calls, off recorded phone calls. And I have, the 5 points to star success. And that is, as we take these critical parts of a phone call and teach to them with tools, and then I'm providing feedback off of that with multiple one-on-one coaching sessions that were actually habit upon habit, change upon change, establishing a new routine.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So let's kind of get down to what's happening right now. As we have all these people coming back to the office, many of them probably aren't generally on the phone. Do you have any tips for an orthodontist to help deal with the situation that we're about to be in?
I sure would. So one of the first things, and this is actually one of the first lessons we teach to in coaching.
Yeah.
But if you do this, and you can get anybody in your team doing this on the phone, it helps elevate the entire call. Let me set it up in this way.
Yeah.
Have you ever been given a gift in the bag it was purchased in?
I have, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Compared to the gift that's been wrapped and with a bow. Even if it was the identical gift, does one feel differently than the other?
Oh, totally. Of course.
Totally does. Keep that in mind as we talk about this. I say when you start a phone call and we're moving past the greeting. So you've said, thank you for calling Dr. Smile's office. This is Amy. How may I help you? The caller then says why they're calling.
Yeah.
Whatever the reason. The very next thing you say is called a first response. I call it because it's the first thing you answer back to. Think about when you call a doctor's office, what is usually the first response? And if you can't think of it, you've been trained, but you usually go, what's your name and your date of birth?
Oh.
Right? Yeah. Is that not true? I mean, to the point that when I call my doctor's office, it's, hello, my name is Amy and my date of birth is blah, 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 blah on there.
Oh, yeah.
And I realize why they do it. They go straight to business because I can't help you until I know who you are, so I can look you up on the computer, so I can service you. We are it's so robotic, and everybody does this when I do that, when I start listening to recordings. We have an opportunity here to insert uncommon courtesy, and it will then take them out of their zombie zone. So when they finally say why they're calling, this is what I want you to insert. I would be happy to help you. May I have your name? I would be happy to help you is what the first response that we train to. And I want you to have an emotion word or a descriptive word. So I have some gentlemen that don't like to say they're happy to help, but they like to say, I can certainly help you. Some kind of modifying word. And what is so interesting is I'm hearing both sides of the conversation without any visual cues. I'm only listening to those audible cues.
Yeah.
But I can almost sense the person on the other line going, huh? Like, wow, that was different. It catches you off guard.
And those are the moments you want to give your customers.
It's a first impression. Yeah. And so we're going to do that at the front of the call. And at the back end of the call, we're going to do the same thing. Instead of, all right, we'll see you Tuesday, bye. And we'd fall off the cliff on here.
Yeah.
I want you to say, we look forward to seeing you Tuesday. Have a great day. I think of it as like,
oh yeah, I'm notorious for that very thing myself. That's good advice.
I want you to think of some kind of, toodle-doo, have a great day, goodbye, and leave that inflection up. What that first and last response is, it's like taking that conversation and wrapping it in paper and in a pretty bow and handing it to them.
Yeah.
As opposed to the plain conversation. So even if you absolutely change nothing else, if you do that, it elevates every single phone call. So that is your first tip for anybody who's going to be having to answer these phone calls. If they can get that first and last response and not fumble over everything else, you've got a big win.
Okay. Are there any things that you just hear often that are just stop doing that?
Yeah.
like really bad.
Yes. Yes. So, I do listen to over 10,000 calls a year. So I do get to see some patterns in that. And one of the other big things, and we're going to have to be doing it, we're having to reschedule so many people, is how you offer appointments. I want you to give them options and authority because this is a scenario where people want to control their calendars. And when people are wanting to control, you have to give them controlled options and then pass the authority. So when you're offering appointments, I want you to do it in this way. I want you to do it as a statement. Dr. Smile has A or B. Which would you prefer? And I want you to keep it as a statement. What I tend to hear is, I have a 1 o'clock, at 1 or 2. And it's a wish. It's not a statement.
Yeah.
I want you to keep it as facts. The correlation here is, okay, how many times have you tried to see parents get their children off of McDonald's Playland after they've been playing? Not so good.
Yeah.
If they go, Johnny, we're going to go, okay. That's a wish.
Yeah.
That's a wish, as opposed to, Johnny, we're going to go in 5 minutes. Do you understand? It's a different question that you're asking. And so when you're offering appointments, the facts are facts, say them as a statement. The follow-up question, which one do you prefer? Which one is the question that you want to ask at that point? And when we can get people converting to that way, their calls are shortened up because they're not this dickering on here. They're not the being negotiated with. They are the air traffic control person at that point.
Oh, so you're actually shortening the call, but you're also keeping it friendly and
exactly.
Because we're gonna have so many calls to reschedule, right? Everyone's the practice is just gonna be overwhelmed. Any efficiency that the practice can gain would be great.
It is a huge win, and it also makes it not so scary to have to make those phone calls. Like, so it's very empowering. So we actually spend a whole lesson from a coaching perspective on that because it's so important. So if you can start and end your calls, and offer appointments well,
Yeah,
you've got about 80% of your call volume taken care of right there.
that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
what other information do we need to let our patients know about other than the potential return date?
So one of the things, I actually found a very interesting research that was done as I was preparing for some verbiage to give back as we go back to work. And one of them was, do we lead with an apology or an apology or appreciation as we get back on the phone with them?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I've seen some people with scripting starting to go around and, I apologize, we were closed and all this kind of stuff. I actually want you to express appreciation first, because there was this study in the Journal of Marketing that was done that was, they had 7 studies within it, and the results were all that offering an appreciation was more effective than offering an apology when there's been a service failure. Now, it's not our
Interesting.
fault, but
Yeah.
us having to cancel appointments is a service failure. Not our fault, but it was, And every one of the studies within there said offer appreciation. So it would be something like this. Mrs. Jones, thank you for your patience as we were going through this. I will be helping to get your appointment rescheduled. Dr. Sma wants to see you in the next week, so I have A or B. Which one works best for you? And the offering of that appreciation, it hits them at their self-esteem. Like, yeah, I was patient, and it
Oh,
really
wow.
helps with that. And the studies also show that it was statistically significant in, well, let me set up the study. The study was, they had a plumber who was supposed to arrive at 11, did not arrive until 12. And the plumber in the control group just arrived and went straight to work. The plumber in the appreciation group said, thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it, and went to work. Then the plumber who offered apology, I'm sorry I'm late. Thank you. I apologize, and went to work.
Yeah.
After the work was done, they looked at 4 areas. One was, how satisfied were you with the plumber and how they handled the service failure? Those that were offered appreciation statistically were more satisfied. Then they asked, how likely are you to use this plumber again? Appreciation was more likely. How likely are you to refer this plumber to your friends? The ones that were offered appreciation, more.
Yeah.
And then the last one area was, how did the plumber handle the situation? How did they make you feel? Did they make you feel important? And the appreciation was. So the first thing I want you to do as you start making those calls is express appreciation. Thank you for your patience as you get ready to reschedule these calls.
That makes sense. Do you have any other tips to make a really good first impression?
So the other one is, making sure that we have that smile, because even though you cannot see the person, you can hear that smile on that phone.
Yeah,
So
that's so
making sure
true.
you're doing that. The other one, a lot of these calls that we're going to have to make are actually going to have to be outbound calls instead of inbound calls, because they don't know when we're actually going to get back to work.
Yeah.
I want you to make sure your outbound greetings are effective.
Okay.
So what I tend to hear, Richie, how many times has this happened? How many times have you picked up the phone? You're like, hello. And they go, Richie. And you're like, or Mr. Jones. And you're like,
yeah.
What are you up to?
Yeah, right.
I hear so many people in the orthodontic office calling out, Mr. Jones. And you're like, wait a minute. So give yourself a full introduction up front. When they say hello, you're like, good morning. This is Amy Demas with Communicate Excellence. How are you today? May I please speak with Mr. Jones? Don't assume. So have a full greeting so that you aren't playing gotcha like you're a telemarketer on there. So that would be one of the other ones. And then, Richie, if I may, one of the other things I've noticed several offices haven't thought about is, I want you to get word out to your clientele who have insurance.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because orthodontics, now those who handle the financial coordination, insurance coordinator know this better. We don't receive the payment for benefits in one lump sum like a medical office does. You know, you go to the doctor today, you get service paid for service today. We are actually getting that insurance payment over the entire course of treatment.
Yeah.
And so insurance cannot lapse in order for them to maximize those benefits. And it is very highly likely that we have patients who've had a lapse in their medical insurance or dental insurance.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I would rather you get a word out proactively and asking your patients to let you know if they have any lapse in insurance coverage so that we can help them cover that potential lapse, as opposed to a bad surprise on the back end. Bad surprises are never good.
Yeah. Surprises in general, when we're trying to get all of this situated under control later, is not going to help with our time management.
It is not. It is not. And you don't want somebody to get done with treatment and all of a sudden, you know, after the insurance has finally caught up with their backlog and they maybe even paid you thinking there was no lapse and you've had to repay the insurance, and now you've got to go find and hunt down the patient for however many hundreds of dollars that were not covered. Let's not have that be a surprise and be the last impression potentially that your patient is going to have of your office.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really, that's something helpful. They're looking, if you have staff and you're not sure what they need to be doing right now, but you've got that PPP loan.
Exactly. So we actually, many of our practice management systems will allow you to isolate those that have insurance contracts that have a balance over zero. Because you don't need to get that kind of message out to the entire population, but you need to get a subset of that.
That makes sense. Yes, segment the message. Also, you could potentially email them as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay.
Just a heads up, you know, doing it as a favor to them on there. So it's really
anything that you're doing to show value as the practice and that you care about the customer. That's those are the types of things we should be doing right now.
Absolutely. For sure.
Then you have something you wanted to show us, I think, of some visuals, I think.
I did. So one of the other things, if I'm an engineer, I'm a little bit of a nerdy kind of person like that. Yeah. But one of the things that I like us to see, sometimes we've heard about the leaky bucket of what happens from our calls to start. What I want to, and I'm going to share my screen in just a moment here, is talk about it in a term that we actually use in banking, called straight-through processing. And first, let me share what this screen is going to do and why, first of all, it is so important. It's going to be so important to go from call to start as efficiently as possible. Obviously, the need for speed on here. But this term or this metric is called straight-through processing. We're going to shorten it to STP. And let me first tell you why it's important. The things that it decreases. I want you to think of that happy path. I mean, it's that person who calls today, comes in tomorrow, and they start the same day. Well, that obviously decreases operating costs because you're not having to touch it so many times.
Yep.
Which decreases the errors, you know, and it decreases this term of shrinkage. It means that they don't get lost between the cracks. You know, so straight through processing is a wonderful thing on here. The other things that it increases, though, are this. It increases the ease of doing business. I mean, why did we go from 3 visits to make a start down to 1? Because it makes it a lot easier for the patient, for the customer.
Yeah.
But in these days, it also is acceleration to funds. The faster we can get start, the faster we have contracts and we've got money to the bank on here.
Oh, of course.
And these days,
that's the ideal situation. They go straight to start.
Yeah, exactly why it's called a happy path. Well, here is what typically happens. Here is our typical STP, straight through processing in orthodontics.
All right.
We're going to start from 100 calls. We have some kind of input. And we actually end up with only 36 starts straight through. That's 36%. I mean, there's this black box in here. We're going to expand what that black box is and uncover it. But it's like, wow. Okay, so we're having to do a lot of work to get to these starts. Let's see where they fall out from. So where does everybody go? Well, the first thing is, will they even come in on here?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
The no-show rate, now you may be surprised that I put 15% here, but many places will have an industry standard of missed appointment rate goal is 5%. Well, that's active patients and new patients all together. I want you, if you do nothing else during this downtime, begin to think about how you're going to separate that out. You need to look at your active patient no-show rate, missed rate, and your new patient no-show rate or missed rate.
Oh, yeah, they should be dramatically different.
They are. They actually are, Rich. They are. I have seen anywhere from 3 to 5 times higher no-show rate or missed appointment rate for new patients than active.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes sense, doesn't it?
Of course. But you don't have you don't have a relationship with them already. They're not on the contract. They're not. Yeah. Exactly.
You got the contract. I mean, if there's a no-show for an active patient, they don't get toward their goal of getting done with treatment. So they eventually work their way back in. But for a no-show for a new patient where they didn't have to put any money down, skin off their nose. So it really can be about as high as 15%, if not 20%. So there's our first dropout. Well, then you have to consider, are they even ready for treatment? So we've got about 35% that drop out because they're not old enough for treatment. They're not dentally mature enough for treatment from their dental tooth alignment where they are. And the thing is, this number has gone up because we are now emphasizing ages 7 and up. Come get your first consult. So I tracked this data for a long time for my husband, and it used to be near 25%. But as soon as the ages 7 and up started to get emphasized, we can get as high as 40% are going into this observation pool.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is a whole nother group of patients that we've got to hold on to so we don't get that shrinkage out of.
Yeah.
But it's still a factor. It's not straight through processing. Then we come to, if they offer a treatment, will they actually accept it? And that's that pending rate on there. So, 35% go to pending. Now, pending can be looked at so many different ways. The way I'm looking at it is, I offered you appointment, I offered you treatment, and do you say yes on there?
Yeah,
so it's a 1-for-1 ratio on here. And I'm looking at that as whether they same day start today or they put an appointment on the calendar, that's a win. But if they go home and have to think about it even for a day, that's not straight through processing.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you still had to touch them again on there. So that's how we get all the way through that. So it's dramatic. Now, you may be interested, how do I calculate this for myself on here? Because it is an important metric to keep track of. There's a very simple math way here instead of counting on your fingers and toes on here.
Yeah,
and it's basically, so if nothing else, keep this in mind as you go away from today. So we want to see how many people keep through the funnel. So if 15% is your no-show rate, that means 85%, that 85 I showed, is how many are still going through. On here. And then you have the same thing for observation, which is if 35% go to observation, that means 65% are still funneling through. And we do it again for the pending rate. And if you remember basic math, 35% of, that means multiply. If you multiply those 3 percentages together is what you get to 36%.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, the cool thing is, we really can't do much about observation. I mean, they are what they are. They're either ready or not. But these 2 dials on the end, that's where we've got some leverage. And, we talk about that first impression. I want that first phone call so impactful, so different. I would be happy to help you. So much making that connection that even if that parent has called 3 or 4 places, And let's say you happen to be the last one in the line that they're going to actually make an appointment and see.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they go to place 1 or 2 and they're like, ooh, that's a good price, that's pretty good, I want to keep you in the game. I want you to go, but I'm going to wait, because that first phone call was, if that first phone call was that much different, I wonder what the rest of the place is like.
Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely.
That's what, and what I find is through these better phone calls, we have reduced that no-show rate by 40%. I mean, that's huge.
Really, because I was wondering how you're measuring your effectiveness.
Yeah.
In your office, your success.
You're measuring that no-show rate, and even down the way, it has echo effects on your pending rate, because if we can better on that first phone call tell them what to expect when they come in, then they're better ready to make that decision when they come in, either because we've invited all the responsible parties there, we've told them what to expect, what to happen. So I've seen our pending rate, those that go to pending decrease by 5%. So, it makes a huge difference on how we set this up, even from that very first phone call. It's our first moment of truth.
That's so true. We combine this with, from our side, we do a lot of marketing automation. So you can put them in these buckets in your system. It can kick off a series of email messages, which could contain video if you're going to be very sophisticated. And if you combine those two efforts, I could see it having a dramatic effect on these.
And you can see which dial is working and which dial is not working on here. And you've got that straight through processing easily calculated, as opposed to something out there on there. Now, by the time those observation patients come around, really your acceptance rate on those should be 95 to 99%. I mean, if they've stuck with you that whole time, and so that feed your starts. But boy, if we can get that straight through processing more effective, it's an amazing thing.
So what would you say is a goal? What percentage should we shoot for that you've seen as reasonable?
I have gotten it to 45%.
Yeah, that's dramatic.
That's out of every 100. Yeah, that's out of every 100 on there. So when you take that, let's see, Gage, who tracks how many new patient phone calls, and a single doctor practice across all their practices was over 800 new patient calls. So you keep multiplying that, and that adds another $300,000 to your bank account.
Oh yeah.
And that's no more money on marketing. Those are the people who expressed interest to you that you finally fulfilled all the way.
Yeah, I tell people, because when we're doing my pitch to someone about what we're doing, the majority of what you're doing is to get people to make the phone call. But a lot of marketing companies, that's where they stop, and we got you the phone call. We'll just give you the ball. Like, no, you have to convert those people into scheduled appointments. You've already paid thousands of dollars to get them to call you. Why would you neglect all the stuff that's going to help with that conversion from call to a scheduled appointment? So it's great to hear someone talking about that conversion aspect of the business, because
it is so important.
Where you've already paid for it. Why are you going to try not to make this more efficient? Because it's just money you're leaving on the table.
And Richie, I liked how you said you saw on my website, if you don't have them at hello, you might as well be saying goodbye to them, because they already have the interest. They're likely going to spend some money somewhere. And so why not with you on here? So one thing on that straight through processing, as we have all these different channels of ways they can come in. So we talked about it overall. Yeah. But you may want to start, we use different procedure codes so that we can separate out Invisalign concierge versus maybe through your, what was your primary referral source? How are your online ads working? How are your chat working? How are your virtual consults working? Because this day and age, there's going to be many ways people can get on and off the highway to you. And so you need to find which one's the most effective, or maybe have it available, but how much are you going to pour into it?
That makes sense.
So keep those things.
What your activity is how you figure this out. Yeah.
It is so important. So I'll turn that off. If we have something else, I'll share it back on there. But yeah, straight through processing. Keep that in mind as you're looking at your metrics.
Yeah, I hadn't heard someone use that term with it, but it makes a lot of sense because that's just the win. Let's get to processed immediately. We're ready to go. Yeah, I really do like that you're focusing on conversion because to me, if you've already paid the money to get them to call you, and maybe it wasn't an online ad, maybe it was just because we spent upteen whatever money on our website and it looks great so they convert, or that billboard, or just word of mouth. One way or the other, you paid for that service, paid for that phone call. So you need to optimize that conversion to a scheduled appointment.
It is. The other thing you need to think about though is, and those who have voice over IP will have better data points on here, is to think about, are you missing calls? Are you abandoning calls?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know, our old ways of plain old telephone and digital, or through our cable companies, we don't get really rich data points. But when they use a service such as yours, when you use some marketing services or you have a voice over IP, you can really get some really fascinating data points in there to find, am I missing calls?
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about using the voice over IP data. We know when someone calls through one of our numbers we're tracking if it's missed. But that'd be great to actually use them.
Yeah, and here's one thing I found is the call length, because some people sometimes
what do you infer from that?
Yeah, so what I find is, if people are going, do I need another person at the front desk or not? Where is that tipping point on here? What I have found is, if calls that are 10 minutes or longer, okay, if they're 10 minutes or longer, once the percent of the inbound calls are more than 4% or 10 minutes or longer, it's not good. What's usually making them that long is not the new patient call. What's usually making that happen is, thank you for calling. May I place you on hold? Kind of like the dog.
Oh, that's interesting.
And they're going on hold so that they can take care of somebody at the front desk, the other phone call or otherwise, eventually getting back to them. And here's the thing that is just like mind-blowing, makes you go, is those calls that were 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 minutes long, the actual transaction took less than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And hold for 8, 9, 10.
Oh, which is total, every second it's hurting your brand.
Keeping it under 2% is really a safe zone. But you can see that when you start looking at, and that's correlating the data points with me actually listening to recordings and making that connection that I found on there.
If we know how many calls we're getting a month, how many, we have a ratio, is 100 calls a month equal this many people in the front desk that is needed?
No, I have not. I have not made that correlation on there. So not necessarily a direct correlation on there. You would also need to look at what times of the day they're coming.
Yeah.
One of the offices I was looking at, their data points is they were getting the surge at 8 o'clock in the morning when they turned on the phones, and the surge at 2 because they closed from 1 to 2.
Yeah.
And these ended up being long calls during that time. Once they finally opened up over lunch and let somebody handle it, it normalized, it level loaded the call volume across there. So, you looking at data points can really help you. And your best data points come off of your voice over IP components, or, marketing services where you have a number tied to a place that is monitoring that. So
those calls per hour chart, I love that chart. And then sometimes you're combining that with, like, when were the missed calls?
Yes.
And you realize I need to stagger lunches because everyone is calling at lunch and the whole team is at Subway at the same time.
Exactly.
Those little things are huge.
They're very insightful as to what's actually going on.
So walk us through when you're working with a client, what is happening over, say, a 6-month period? How are you interacting with them and the team?
So over that 6-month period, I divided into 3 phases. So actually, when I work with an office, I set it up for 9 months. It's very heavy loaded up front. So you're going to see those changes within the first 3 months. You have phase 1, that training. tools in the toolbox, my remote training or on-site training there.
Yeah.
Then you have 3 months of coaching, one-on-one coaching sessions where I will have listened to phone calls, one-on-one coaching, and I provide a report for each person, to each person, and back to the doctor after every coaching session.
Yeah, that's
every
nice.
single time.
So it's totally transparent. We're not.
Everything's going on. But yet it's a very high trust station with that individual I'm coaching, because we're sitting here eyeball to eyeball on Zoom, which we're all familiar with nowadays.
Yeah, of course.
And so there's 5 sessions within that first 3 months. Then after we've gotten these habits put in, take a step back, almost like, hands off the person with training wheels not on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how you go. And I check back in a maintenance phase. That's phase 3 at month 6 and month 9. Gotcha. What I find is when I check in at month 6, you might see a slight degradation. 85% of what's going to still be there at month 9 usually be back in place where we want it to be. That also lets us go through a stress cycle, because stress impacts performance. So you're going to get through a summer. You're going to get through the new year insurance change. Yeah. You're going to get through somebody out sick or a maternity leave. So allowing them to go through that stress cycle and ensure that their habits are actually stable is so important as well. So you're going to see the changes in the first 3 months of time.
Are you listening to the calls to kind of make sure that?
For every person, I listen to about an hour's worth of phone calls before every coaching session for every person. So it's a lot. That's why I get 10,000 calls listened to a year.
Yeah, right. I can imagine. You must hear stuff all over the map.
Heard what I heard sometimes. Oh my! But after listening to so many, you learn where the critical points are, and that's why we divide it into 5 sessions, because we're talking 2 or 3 habits each time. And it's the 5 critical ones. After listening to so many phone calls, you learn where they are. And yet the thing is, people know the right answer. People know the right answer, but they don't realize that they're not doing it. And so then providing the recording clips and playing it back to them, it's like a mirror. And they go, I didn't realize. And so it also helps them to self-correct in some of that way as well.
Yeah, hearing a recording. It's just like watching yourself do a presentation. It just totally changes the game. And,
it does. It sure does.
Or just even a lot of if you're like having some of this call tracking software, it'll tell you how much you're talking versus listening in a conversation. And that is very eye-opening, I think, because some people they're talking way more than they should, or maybe they're not talking enough. And you can hey, there's a percentage you spoke and here's the percentage they spoke. You need to fix this because you should be listening to them, their information.
A rule of thumb to think about on that is never talk on the phone more than 30 seconds at a time without a break.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And the reason that's so important is, especially on that first phone call, sometimes we go into this verbal vomit area, and 30 seconds at most, or you start hearing them kind of fade out otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, to me, people on the front line are just so important for the brand of the practice. And I think they're taken for granted. I remember one of my first jobs was working at Pella Windows, and I was the inside sales guy. And I didn't know what I was doing. And you're talking, people who get Pella Windows are generally of at least upper middle class, because they're like the most expensive window. And it was in Connecticut, actually. I was living up there for a little while. So I remember I didn't even know how to take a message properly. This is after college. Like you just don't learn this stuff. Sometimes you don't learn this stuff. No one taught me.
It is trial by fire. I know my husband, with us being closed, he's going into the office a couple times a week and collecting the messages and then having to document it in the things. And he's like, I can't wait till we get back to work so the scheduling coordinator can do that. He's like, this is tough. And I don't even have people coming in and out at the same time, It's tough work. And when you leave those messages, Richie, I would, one of the other tips for those, because if we're outbound calling, we're probably going to end up with lots of leaving of messages.
Yes.
Make sure you say your name and phone number and the reason for calling twice.
Twice? That's interesting.
Twice. This is Amy at da 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 da. Again, this is Amy with Dr. Demas, da 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 da. Because it's so frustrating when you miss the number the first time. So say it twice. It's a consideration for your caller on there.
Yeah,
so
that's
we
great.
may be having to do that a lot these days.
How do you feel about, we were just talking to Ruby recently, and they have the virtual receptionist. How do you feel about that idea?
During this time when we can't have somebody, and I was going in and listening in on that discussion you had.
Yeah.
I can totally see how that is an appropriate component when we can't be in the office, so that somebody can reach someone as opposed to an answering machine on there. So it really fits the bill during this time. When we're back live, I would have that on the off hours, which is what I was is intended for. But there's still that component that they need to contact and connect with you. What is you? What is the face of your practice on there?
Yeah, because your message, it's always going to be more customized to the practice, the doctor's brand, of course.
Absolutely.
But it's still, so you're saying it's like kind of the lesser of the two evils. I'd rather have someone answer the phone than just going to voicemail in off hours.
Right. And feeling like it's not going to get to never ever land and not be answered for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days, whatever the case may be.
Oh yeah, that's the worst. Someone calls and then they never hear back from you. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, schedule something, learn more about what should they do?
My website is communicateexcellence.com. Just how it's spelled, one word, communicateexcellence.com. And the other thing is, if you want to learn more, I did publish a book, came out in January. It's under the title, the same name, Communicate Excellence, and it's a guide to front desk communication. And you can purchase that off of Amazon. So you'll see a lot of these tips even in there.
Oh, perfect. Oh, we do have a question. So if you have someone we expect that people missed appointments or rescheduled, might be upset. Do you have advice for dealing with difficult people?
So if you've called, you've done that, expressing appreciation, they're still a little hot under the collar. One of the first things I would have you do is, if they're expressing the frustration, let them vent.
Yes.
Think about, do you have an Instapot, Grinchy? One of those pressure cookers? Yeah. What is the thing they say when you're venting it? Never put your hand in front of the venting pot because you're going to get burned.
Yes, that's good advice.
But once it's vented, you can safely put your hand there. And so basically in the conversation where somebody is venting, don't interrupt them. Let the vent happen, and then you can safely get into the conversation on there. And make sure you express that you heard them and you understand. I heard, Mrs. Jones, I understand how that would be frustrating. What we're going to do is, and then turn the conversation is, what we're going to do is we're going to get you in as soon as possible. So what Dr. Smile has is A or B. Which one works best for you?
Oh, that's great advice. Thank you so much. I did learn a lot, and I'm not the best person in the world on the phone, so it's great to hear advice about how to be better on it. Yeah, I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad I was able to be here today. Thank you for asking.
Yep, and we'll put all the information on the recap if anyone wants to talk to Amy a little bit more. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.